Hello, my name is Hugo Prévost. Welcome to Entretiens, journalistiques. All you hear in my voice today, I have an English-speaking guest. So Chris Dornan, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Oh, delighted to be here, Hugo.
And we're talking today because obviously we're still in a federal election. We are recording this on April 23rd, so I am 5 days to go before the end of this electoral race. We're talking today because something happened last week. Something strange, usually something that is a bit more inside baseball for a journalist and reporter, but something that I think is important to talk about. And since you were, because you're now retired, as you told me a few minutes ago, since you were an associate professor at the University of Carleton, there we go. I'll try to enunciate it correctly today. And you will specialize working at the School of Journalism and Communication. I want to hear you on this topic. And this topic is, of course, I want to call it an intervention of rebel news and other right-wing media. This don't want to say kidnapping of the media attention, but yeah, what happened exactly in your words?
Well, so we have two leaders debates, one in French, one in English. And there's a body that organizes and manages those debates. That's the Leaders Debate Commission. And this is an autonomous, independent body. It's not a media organization. It was created in 2018 to precisely to run the debate.
Yeah.
So the French language debate went fine. After the debate, then there's an opportunity for the members of the news media to ask questions of the leaders themselves. And they do that one by one. Each of the leaders comes out into a room with the news journalist there, and the news journalist asks them questions for a period of time. Then the next leader comes out. Now, what happened at the French leaders' debate is that the questioning was dominated by media outlets that probably most people had not heard of. I'm sure people who were on the right knew these organizations, but maybe most Canadians, in Quebec and the rest of Canada, hadn't heard of them. And these were organizations called Rebel News, True North, and Juno.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically had the majority of the time to ask questions of the leaders, and these are unapologetically, they make no secret of this, they are far right organizations that exist to promote a very right wing political viewpoints. So following this, given the fact that they dominated the question, there were concerns and questions themselves put to the Leaders Debate Commission about why were these people allowed to dominate the questioning. And the answer to that is that some people argue that they shouldn't have been there at all, that they're not legitimate news organizations, that they are agitators and provocateurs, and they're not there to provide a balanced or neutral point of view, but indeed to advance and to propagandize for a political agenda. Well, the reason that they were there goes back actually 2 elections ago.
Mm-hmm.
That when the Leaders Debate Commission was created in 2018, the first election that it managed debates for was in 2019. And they had to accredit members of the news media to be allowed to ask the leaders questions, to be allowed to be on the premises and in the media room during the debate. And so they basically were in a position of saying, saying who could be there on the part of the media and who could not. they were in the position to say, this organization is a legitimate journalist organization and has the right to be at the debate, and this other organization is illegitimate and has no right to be at the debates.
Mm-hmm.
So back in 2019, the Leaders Debate Commission said Rebel News and True North also petitioned to be there, and the Leaders Debate Commission said, no, you're not entitled to be there. We don't recognize you as legitimate journalistic organization, and they went to court.
Yeah, and they won twice, I think. Yeah,
exactly. They won in 2019. They went to court again in the 2021 election. And they went to court again in the 2025 election. In the 2019 election, they won because the Leaders Debate Commission did not publicize the criteria by which they were deciding who should be accredited and who shouldn't. Mm-hmm. There was no transparency to the process. So the court said, well, that's not fair to these organizations, and you must accredit them. So the subsequent election, the 2021 election, the commission did publicize the criteria, and they said that organizations that engage in political advocacy would not be accredited, would not be eligible. And again, Rebel News and the others took them to court, and the court basically ruled against the Leaders Debate Commission and in favor of Rebel News and the others, on the grounds that lots of news media organizations engage in what you call political advocacy. Mm-hmm. The example they cited was the Toronto Star, which is guided by a set of is what's called the Atkinson principles, that says that the newspaper is motivated by a sense of social justice, that it's out there to right wrongs and to redress political inequity. So again, the Leaders Debate Commission, was dealt a blow by the court. In the case of in the last go round, again, Rebel News and the others took the Leaders Debate Commission to court, and this time the Rebel News and the others argued that there was a disparity and unfairness in how media organizations were accredited. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Post Media, which is the largest private sector news company in the country, owns newspapers from the Montreal Gazette to the Vancouver Sun, including the Ottawa Citizen and the Edmonton Journal. So they own scores of newspapers. And each of these, large papers would have the right to send a reporter into the media room if they so choose. So the Rebel News argued that, well, if Post Media, which owns all these newspapers, is allowed to send a number of reporters representing the same company, then Rebel News, which has like 25 employees, they say, should be allowed to send 25 journalists to the room if they want. And the Leaders Debate Commission basically just kind of threw up its hands in resignation and exasperation. They said, well, we can't be defending ourselves against these kind of annoying and pernicious lawsuits on the time. So they basically said, yeah, okay, and allowed them, I think it was 6 journalists that they could send. And then True North could send stuff and Juno could send people. So what happened was when it came to the questioning, after the French language leaders debate, the sheer numbers of the journalists, or if you want to call them journalists, the sheer numbers of the representatives, let's say, of these far-right organizations muscled their way to the front of the queue, the line, to ask questions. And as a result, dominated the questioning and froze out other organizations
Yes.
like the Montreal Gazette and the Edmonton Journal and the CBC. Um, so, so that was that caused a good deal of consternation and head scratching following the French language leaders debate. Then, and this is where I think it really came to national attention.
Yeah.
Following the English language leaders debate, um, the these organizations, particularly Rebel News, which, as I say, has a reputation for being agitators and provocateurs,
Mm-hmm.
tried to muscle their way onto kind of the sound stage for CBC English language coverage of the debate. Had to be security, the police had to be called to get them to, and there were very heated arguments, exchanges in the media room between what we might call, the legitimate press, the legacy media, and the right wing media. And it was, in fact, actually, it wasn't even so much the legacy media. The arguments were between other small startups organizations like Ricochet Media or the Hill Times. Is not a startup, but it's it's not the CBC. It's
a
a
smaller
publication.
media. Yes.
Exactly. So they had arguments with Rebel News and the other right wing agitators to the effect that these guys have hijacked the proceedings. They're doing a political disservice to the country. And they're basically misbehaving themselves to the detriment of the public good. And things got so heated that the Leaders Debate Commission said, well, we can't guarantee a kind of safe and sane space for the post-debate questioning, so we're going to cancel the whole thing. And that's basically where we are now.
Yeah, and maybe have two questions for you. Well, first of all, what we usually say in the industry is that we journalists don't want to be in the news. We want to report the news. We want to take a back seat from the what's happening, because we're not actors of what's happening out there. We're people that are once again collecting the facts and reporting them. But that being said, my first question will be maybe more of a legal standpoint, because, as you said, Rebel News and other organizations went to court. They won each time they went to court against the commission. With everything that happened after the leaders debate in English, we can maybe argue that it was against the court decision, but still, if for the next election, for example, maybe 2029, maybe earlier, if we get a minority government in less than a week, we'll see. What can they do? Because can Rebel News and other groups call for the police to be able to get into the debate, to be able to cover it? Can the commission, as they already did, ask for the police to take these journalists, in quotation marks here, out of the room? Is the police going to fight the police? What's going to happen?
Well, the Leaders Debate Commission is required. Part of its mandate is to deliver a report to Parliament after each election to basically account for itself. Why did it take the decisions that it did, and to make recommendations about how the next debates should be organized. So they will have a task before them to write that report, and I'll be very interested in seeing what it contains. But we do have an interesting issue here in that, I myself, I don't believe that that Rebel News and True North and Juno, I do not believe that they are legitimate journalistic organizations. I think they are masquerading as journalistic organizations. They are kind of wolves in sheep's clothing. That they are really political actors. As I say, they are agitators.
And we
however,
sorry to interrupt, but we learned in the hours following the debate that Rebel News is registered as a third party in the election. So
Yeah,
it's not even a media organization, it's a political entity in that case.
that's right. Exactly. And they had to do so because in previous elections, they wanted to put up signs
Mm-hmm.
that sort of, like lawn signs advocating their positions, and they were told, well, you can't do that because you're not a political party and you're not registered as a political advocacy group.
Yeah.
So they said, okay, well, we'll register as a political advocacy group so that our political speech will not be stifled. But we've got a very interesting position here. So. At the French language leaders debate, there were questions from other organizations, media organizations, that perhaps were not widely known or recognizable to many Canadians, including La Converse and the Rover. Both out of Quebec. La Converse is a French language publication. The Rover, English language, but comes out of Montreal.
Yes.
And these are the types of publications that I think we want to encourage and applaud in a media environment in which the traditional news media are struggling. They're small, nimble, startup organizations. Motivated by a sense of the public good, and motivated also by a sense that the type of coverage that we're getting from the traditional legacy media is itself flawed, that there are blind spots, that there's stories that the corporate media don't pursue or don't notice. So you could say, and I'm sure that they would say themselves, La Condesse and the Rover or Ricochet Media, that they are motivated by a kind of social agenda. In the case of La Converse, it's a community-based media organization that stands in opposition to a kind of corporate media that's not rooted in communities, that kind of rooted in corporate boardrooms, answerable to profit rather than to a sense of social conscience. So you could say, well, these are organizations that exist to promote a kind of progressive worldview, that they're on the left. So why should we encourage and applaud news organizations that exist on the progressive spectrum, but decry and denounce organizations like Rebel News that exist on the right?
Yeah.
So I think that the task before the Leaders Commission is to draw a legitimate distinction that doesn't have to do with left or right. In English Canada, the National Post, one of the national newspapers, was explicitly created to promote a right of center point of view. And so, it exists on the right. It's a legitimate news organization, but it just looks at the world through a kind of right-wing lens.
Yes.
So the task, I think, is to draw a distinction between, the kind of legitimate full spectrum of political perspective that you want in a democracy. You don't want the media all adopting the same point of view. You want a kind of, marketplace and competition of perspective and ideas. But to draw the distinction between, a responsible and conscientious right-wing publications and the irresponsible and unconscientious organizations like Rebel News and Juno and True North. So what is it that marks Rebel News as different in kind from other more responsible right-wing organizations? If you could draw that distinction, if you could spell out a kind of compelling ground, what that distinction, then you might have grounds to say that a court would recognize that Rebel News is not a legitimate news organization and should not be accredited to cover things like the national leaders' debate.
And when you look at Rebel News, at other similar groups, we obviously think of what's happening in the USA with Newsmax, maybe not Fox News. Well, maybe Fox News, but anyway.
Well, maybe Fox News.
But yeah, so over there, over at the south of the border, we, in accordance to the First Amendment of the Constitution, of course, with the right to say basically whatever you want to say, we have this situation where there is this polarization, of course, political polarization, social polarization, where you have on the right, as I said, Fox News, Newsmax, other media outlets, so to say. And on the left, you may have something like Jacobin Magazine, and other leftist-ish publications. Do you think that, because obviously, as I said, when we see Rebel News, we think about what's happening in the US. Do you think that this situation, this dangerous situation that we see in the US is already there in Canada, or maybe it's slowly getting here?
Well, that's something I think we should certainly be alert to, vigilant about, because we don't want the situation that has obtained now in the United States, in which the responsible and conscientious media are under siege. Only yesterday, the chief producer of 60 Minutes at CBS resigned because the editorial integrity and the independence of the program had been threatened because of actions by Trump. So, on the one hand, the conscientious media outlets are under attack, while at the same time, the White House is handing out like candy press accreditation to very extreme and very extreme right-wing organizations that indeed exist in order to promote the MAGA viewpoints. And we've seen when President Zelensky was in the White House, the first question was not a question; it was an accusation about why wasn't he wearing a suit? This was disrespectful to the office of the White House and the President of the United States. Well, that question came from one of these extreme right-wing organizations that the White House has bestowed favors on. So the White House is using these organizations in order to advance its political agenda. So journalism is inherently a political enterprise. But in America, the national news coverage has been politicized, the way in which Supreme Court has been politicized. And this is not an example we wish to follow. We don't want a politicized Supreme Court, and we don't want our national news media to be the instrument of whoever's in power.
Yeah, but
quite the opposite.
Absolutely. But besides tradition, besides, let's call it the weight of the institutions over here, because, for example, if the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre win next week, they promise to defund the CBC. They promise also to keep Radio-Canada, but they can't really defund one and keep the other. It's mixed. But anyway, that's another question. But
yes.
What are the guardrails in place? Because it doesn't seem to be, besides, as I said, tradition and the weight of the institutions and non-written code somewhere. What are the guardrails in your view against this, let's call it an Americanization of news media?
Well, one of the guardrails I think that used to exist, and the one that it's probably in a liberal democracy where freedom of expression is paramount. Um, the what prevented kind of extremism from taking root in Canada was that there was not fertile soil for it.
Mm-hmm.
That the public, the kind of information marketplace simply didn't want it. Rebel News actually comes out of a television news organization called Sun News, which was created, in the early 2000s, precisely to be a kind of Fox News of the North, to promote, the right wing point of view, to basically, preach to the converted. But unlike the CBC, on the cable and satellite dials, Sun News did not receive a must-carry license from the CRTC. It was available, but you had to subscribe. You had to say, I had to choose that the way in which you might choose, TVA or TSN to get sports. And not enough Canadians decided that they wanted it, that they weren't willing to pay to be harangued with this perpetual right wing point of view, and so it failed as a business. So there was it wasn't that the CRTC said, we disallow it. It wasn't that there was an act of parliament that said this is the sort of extremism that we will not tolerate in Canada. No, it was available. It was put to the Canadian public, and the Canadian public, in sufficient numbers, said no. Now, more than 10 years later, I'm sure that situation has changed. I'm not sure it would still, I'm not sure it would find sufficient subscribers on the cable dial. But the point is, it doesn't have to anymore.
Yeah.
Rebel News, which came out of the ashes of Sun News, exists entirely on the internet, and it's a website, it's a YouTube channel, and so YouTube is full of extremists of all forms and the rationality of all forms. If the question is, well, how do we prevent the sort of extremist points of view from finding audiences? I think the answer is you can't. That they will find audiences, and they will have effect. One of the things that has emerged from the current election campaign is quite marked distinctions in age demographics over political leaning. That, for example, women overwhelmingly, according to the polls, lean toward the Liberals and Mark Carney, whereas young men apparently lean overwhelmingly toward the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, and are much more receptive to extreme right-wing views. Not just right-wing views, but extreme right-wing views are much more receptive to the kind of the Trumpian rhetoric, who are much more inclined. They're not nearly as upset about the 51st state annexed Canada bit. And so the question becomes, well, what is that? Why are young men more inclined to embrace extreme right-wing views than other pockets of the population? And in part, I'm sure the answer is their media diet. What they are consuming, and what they're consuming is stuff from the gaming community and YouTube influencers and TikTok influencers. So the media diet does have a quite it has political effects that are not without consequence. So if the question is, well, how do you combat that if you find extreme right-wing views, leaning toward the fascist, certainly coming out of the States, if you find that a threat to the public good and the common well-being, how do we combat it? And I think the answer is that we're now engaged in a perpetual propaganda war for the hearts and minds of the population, and that the extreme right must be answered by progressive views that advocate a different political agenda, and that's where publications like La Converse and the Rover and the Narwhal come from.
And so, what happened last week, in your view, is not a not lying. It's not a not liar. It's the new normal.
I think it's a harbinger of things to come. Yes. And certainly I think a lot of the population, what they saw in action at the leaders' debate, and certainly in the cancellation of the scrums, they were appalled. They recoiled from the behavior of Rebel News. But there are lots of other people for whom Rebel News, I'm sure, is emboldened by what happened. They certainly got national attention in a way that they could hardly have dreamed of before. So yeah, we're going to get more of this.
Well, that's reassuring.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Christopher Dornan, thank you very much for being here today with us.
Oh, thank you, Hugo. It was a pleasure.
And obviously, if you want to catch up on previous episodes, you can find us on Pierre. We're also on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, and YouTube. And as usual, if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, you get access every week to all content that is published. Obviously, mostly in French, but also like this podcast episode in English. So thank you once again, and until next time.